Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. It's Paulie Esther here, and today I'm here to tell you that the next killer in Dead by Daylight for Chapter 21 DLC is going to be none other than Candyman again. It should come as no surprise to anyone that my first theory coming out is going to be Candyman. Have I done this before? I feel like I maybe have done this before a time or two. I'm not too sure, but hey, if there's one thing that we have all learned from the Candyman franchise, it's you have to say his name 5 times for him to appear. And I think we're about there. I don't know, is this my 5th theory video about Candyman coming to Dead by Daylight? It's pretty close, 4th or 5th. I think we're there. Who's counting? Who's counting? But yeah, so we're gonna talk about whether or not the next killer is going to be Candyman today. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is some Dataminer information. Keep in mind that the Dataminer information is not official and may very well be wildly inaccurate, even though in times it has been spot on. That doesn't mean that going forward it's always going to be correct. Now this information comes from the master Dataminer Mass, and this is information that talks about the Chapter 21 cosmetics that shows that the new killer is going to have 2 cosmetics, one of which is going to be that $14.85 Oryx sales price, which would indicate that it is either an ultra rare or a legendary. Now, basically ultra rare and legendary do the same thing. It's just different classifications for a cosmetic that changes a character into an entirely different character. So, for example, an ultra rare would be the Trapper changing into Krampus, which is public domain. A legendary changes a character into a different character that is licensed, such as Cheryl Mason changing into Sybil Bennett, for example. Those are both licensed and it changes into a different character. Or Steve Harrington changing into Jonathan Byers. That's a different character and they're both licensed. So we see here from this information that whoever the new killer is, they are going to change into a different person, it looks like. So from this information, the other thing that Mass discussed was that there's only 2 options here. Either all the cosmetics aren't added into the files yet, because an original killer normally has like an array of 6 different simple recolors of their base default outfit, and they're not seeing any of that at all in the files for this upcoming chapter, or it's a licensed killer. So it seems to point to the fact that it is a licensed killer with these minimalist options for cosmetics, one of which being changing into someone else. So what does that mean? So if you're familiar with the Candyman movies at all, you know that there is a very obvious option from the first movie on a legendary skin in which you could change Candyman from himself into another person, Helen Lyle, to fit that role as killer. And they're also in the new movie, in the reboot, they're alluding or foreshadowing that Anthony McCoy has some connection to Candyman and may be becoming the new Candyman. We won't know until we see the new movie, of course, how it all plays out, but they kind of are leading you down that path through the trailers. So we'll have to see what happens. The other information that we got from the data miners is that as of the file status right now, there is no corresponding survivor to go along with whoever this killer is for Chapter 21, which means it's going to be more of a paragraph style release where they only have one end of the chapter, like we saw with Ghostface with no corresponding survivor, or with Leatherface with no corresponding survivor, just standalone killers. Now, this could be due to the dates of release. The rumored date for the PTB is supposedly August the 17th. Remember, this is all just Dataminer information and none of it is official, which would it would predate the release of the actual Candyman movie. So perhaps there's some kind of a delay in adding this character to the files so that the PTB doesn't spoil things for the movie. Not too sure about that. The rumors from the data miners is that there will be a survivor release, but it won't be until 6 weeks later after the release of the chapter. Now, whether or not that Survivor is going to be connected to this Candyman chapter or not. We'll have to wait and see. The Dataminer mass seems to be 99% sure that whoever the survivor is that's released in 6 weeks later in the mid-chapter 21.5 will be an original survivor and not part of the licensing. So we have to keep our eyes on that one, but that's the information that we have to this point. So one of the reasons I have been such a big proponent of Candyman is because this film was actually shot and completed at the end of 2019. It was supposed to come out in June of 2020, and it subsequently got 3 different release dates delayed because of the pandemic, of course. And it seemed to be the hot topic film of the day, most relevant to what was going on in horror at the time. It seemed like more of an obvious pick to me. And now that the movie is finally coming out, it seems to still be the most obvious pick. Lots of people have this as their own prediction as well. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Interestingly, little side note story here. When I met Matthew Cote in February 2020 at PAX, I watched another content creator wag their finger in Matthew Cote's face and said, "I know the next chapter is going to be Candyman, and you can't tell me otherwise." This was like the day after that the trailer for the movie had dropped. And just wag their finger in Matthew Cote's face. And I just stood on the sidelines and watched, and I thought 2 things. I thought, wow, is that ever so rude to put Matthew Cote on the spot like this? And I also watched closely from the sidelines to try and get a read on Matthew Cote. And what I discovered from that time was that I don't want to play poker with Matthew Cote because he has a pretty good poker face as far as I'm concerned. I got absolutely no read off of him, just being harangued out of the blue with this wagging finger. And he didn't have a visible reaction that I could see. I don't know what was going on internally for him, but I got no reaction from him on that. So take what you will for that. But hey, I'm the guy who's like, I went to dinner with Matthew. Well, I guess we didn't go to dinner. King and I and our close friends all had dinner together. Matthew joined us for dessert. And then like the next day he said there was a massive clue, by the way, and you missed it. And I was like, what? Why are you telling me this? So I racked my brain over everything that happened that day. And I convinced myself that the fact that Matthew only came for dessert and he had a cheesecake meant sweets to the sweet, Candyman, kaboom. And that didn't wind up being true. It was Silent Hill. So that was an experience. So this might not be Candyman either. But hey, this is where I'm going with it. It seems like it has the best shot. But you know, Dead by Daylight never does anything predictable. I don't think anyway. Most of the time, it's very unpredictable. And this could be the case again. And it might not be Candyman. And who knows if we'll ever get Candyman. So there are a great number of people who believe that this Candyman chapter has been in the works for a long time, but it has been delayed itself, just like the movie has been delayed, and that it caused Dead by Daylight to accelerate their schedule and push all of their other chapters first, which maybe is true and maybe accounts for some of the problems with these other releases that had to be bumped up in the schedule. It's not like this is the first time we've ever seen a hole come up in the schedule. I remember where Ethan Almo was talking about the Deathslinger, the Chains of Hate chapter, and said that that came about because they had a gap in the schedule that had to be filled, and the Deathslinger himself was accelerated for reasons. So, you know, it's not unheard of. I'm not sure that that's true, but it might explain a lot of things about the process of creating chapters and having to suddenly get chapters out more quickly than you had anticipated because of pandemic delays for a movie. I don't know. It's a possibility. But other than the actual release date of the Candyman movie lining up so well with this chapter, what else have you got, Paul? You got any evidence? Well, we do have this tweet here from Tony Todd, the man who played Candyman himself, where he replied to a tweet that said, "I want to see a Candyman horror game with Tony Todd in it." And Tony Todd replied simply with, "Just wait." So that seems to indicate that there is something in the works. Like, why would he say that unless something was in development? And he also, even just yesterday, recently came out with this tweet here in which he said, Yes, indeed, each job leads to the next, off for the first of many voiceover sessions for the latest project. Shh. Now this, I'm not so entirely sure that this would be related to Dead by Daylight. I know audio seems to be one of the last things that they work on for a chapter, but would you be working on it this late in the game? I don't know. I mean, if we could get a hold of Groovy Bruce and ask him how close he had done his voice lines for Ash compared to when that Ash paragraph came out, maybe that would give us a better picture of it. But Tony Todd is doing voiceover work for something. Whether or not it's as Candyman for Dead by Daylight, I have no idea, but that would be so cool. Okay, Paulie, but what else have you got other than a couple of tweets and a release date for a movie? Well, you may remember if you watched my video about the reveal of the Golden Toolbox on the Dead Dog Saloon map that I talked about all of the bottles in the saloon and how they were very strange and had writing on them. Now, if you go into another map, like such as the Ormond Resort, you just see the bottles with a generic label on them that say beer. But all of the bottles in the saloon are really weird where they have lines of prose on them. I would expect them to say, you know, things like whiskey and, you know, things like that. Names of alcohol on the bottles, generic labels on these bottles. But these are all very different, wrapped with prose on them. And I just can't make any sense of it, why they would be like this, unless it was for a specific purpose. Now, originally we had thought that these bottles were clues to the location of the Golden Toolbox, which they still may be, but I can't really figure out how to put them together and interpret them, because they seem to have the odd emboldened word here on them. Like this one says begins, this one says with, and some people think that this one says sting, which initially we were like, blow our minds. I've been holding on to this information for a year, by the way. That begins with sting was like a clue that Candyman was coming, which obviously Candyman began changing into Candyman with the first stings of bees on him. But I don't think this actually says sting. So what does it say? So one day, by looking at the bottles and typing in a few lines of text that I could read off the bottles into Google, I got a hit, and it turns out that what's wrapped around every single bottle in that Dead Dog Saloon are excerpts from a short story written by George Washington Cable entitled The Dance in Place Congo, where he talks about Congo Square in New Orleans. Candyman 2 is set in New Orleans, by the way, and how the Creole people danced in the square to the sounds of the bambula drums. Okay, but who is George Washington Cable? Well, he's a Southern author, post-Civil War era, rose to his heights in the 1880s. He was a good friend of Mark Twain, and they toured together. And here's the way that Mark Twain described George Washington Cable. He wrote, "When it comes down to moral honesty, limpid innocence, and utterly blemishless piety, the apostles were mere policemen when compared to George Washington Cable." So George Washington Cable is considered one of the early civil rights authors. Much of the themes of his writings talk about racial inequality in society. He was actually drummed out of New Orleans and the South entirely because of the themes of his writing. He wound up moving to Massachusetts because of threats to him and his family. So why are these excerpts of George Washington Cable's work plastered over every single bottle on the Dead Dog Saloon map? Your guess is as good as mine, but it's an oddly specific choice, isn't it? So here's what my guess is. Well, George Washington Cable, his most famous work is entitled Madame Delphine, and it's a novella in which a mother tries to hide the biracial nature of her daughter from society so that she will be accepted. It's set in New Orleans, Louisiana, and in my mind I see a very strong parallel between that story and the plot of Candyman 2, in which Annie Tarrant's mother tries to hide from everyone the biracial nature of her own daughter, having descended from the lineage of Daniel Robitaille, the Candyman, and Caroline Sullivan. So what do you think? Have I convinced you? It's so strange that George Washington Cable's works appear on these bottles, unless whoever is in charge of doing bottle texture in Dead by Daylight just said, oh, I really like this author, I'm just gonna put prose of his works on these bottles for some reason, instead of getting someone to make up fake labels. It's just so strange to me and so specific that there has to be some kind of a meaning to it, and that's what I've come to. I don't know if you're convinced or not. Maybe you are convinced. Hey, maybe even the devs are convinced. Maybe the devs are like, damn, maybe we are releasing Candyman and we don't even know it. I don't know. But that's where I'm at right now, and that's why I think that the next release is going to be Candyman as the new killer in Dead by Daylight, even if he isn't, and I'm wrong again. So there you go. That's what I have for you today. Thank you for coming to my Tinfoil Talk. I appreciate it as always. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that bell like a wraith. Let me know what you think about my craziness in those comments below. I'm probably wrong again, let's face it. And then we can do this all over for the next chapter, that it's Candyman, it's Candyman. It's always Candyman, Paulie. All right, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to take care of each other in and out of the fog, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. It's a Gen Rush life for us. It's a Gen Rush life for us. Set a hiding, we do gens. Set a randoms, we got friends. It's a Gen Rush life.